So our first speaker in the second session is Yassana Croizat Glazer, if I'm pronouncing her name rightly. Yassana received her PhD from the Institute of Fine Arts. She wrote her dissertation on feminine beauty and sexuality as they were interpreted by writers favored by François Ier and by artists employed at the Chateau of Fontainebleau. And after teaching at New York University in the art history department, she became a fellow in the Department of European Sculpture and Decorative Arts at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and later assistant curator with particular focus on visitor engagement. She's now, very recently, as I understand, an independent scholar, and is currently researching the artistic manifestations of Normandy's relationship to Brazil in the early 16th century. And her recent publications include the role of ancient Egypt in the masquerades of the court of François Ier in the Renaissance Quarterly of winter 2013, and Sin and Redemption in the Hours of François Ier by the master François de Rohan for the Metropolitan Journal of 2013. And so we are going to get, I think, a 16th century perspective on the 19th century in her talk, Fueling the Fire of Invention, The Myths of Bernard Palissy. Please join me in welcoming Yassana Croizat.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for that introduction. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Susan Weber and Bard for inviting me to participate in this very exciting conference, and also to thank the Majolica International Society for making this event possible. As far as artist mythologies are concerned, the 16th century Protestant potter and scientist Bernard Palissy offers a particularly interesting case study, since his image has proven as malleable as the clays that fascinated him throughout his lengthy career. Palissy is also remarkable because of the significant place he has held in France's consciousness even to this day, a phenomenon reflected in the fact that his name is used for one of the country's national search engines, the Base Palissy for the decorative arts. A dearth of documents, the fact that he didn't sign his pieces, and that he had numerous followers and imitators have all contributed to complicating our picture of the man and his creations, as has the emergence of evidence proving the production of earthenware with molded decoration and narrative scenes, the so-called suite Palissy, in places like the Pré d'Auge, that is well beyond the sphere of Paris and Fontainebleau. Our knowledge thus remains fragmentary, even after 30 years of renewed interest in the potter, following excavations conducted between 1984 and 1987, which unearthed 6,000 objects and 2,000 fragments connected to his atelier's experimentations. The purpose of my talk today is to examine what image of himself and his working methods Palissy, who was of course central to the flourishing of Majolica in many ways, sought to leave behind for posterity, and to consider how and why he became such an iconic figure from both an artistic and political perspective in 19th century France. Most scholars accept Palissy's birth date as 1510, which is the date given by his close friend, the chronicler Pierre de l'Étoile, and his place of birth as Agen, which is halfway between Bordeaux and Toulouse. Palissy started out as a glass painter. He also worked as a surveyor and had a profound interest in the natural sciences, geology, and agriculture. He began to focus on pottery in earnest while in the southwestern town of Saintes, where he moved around 1539 and started a family. There he developed his terre jaspée, pottery imitating the colors and modeled effects of jasper, chalcedony, and other stones, and then his rustic figurine, for which he used life casting and thin glazes to create aquatic environments bursting with life. His work earned him the title of Inventeur de rustique figurines du roi, having attracted the attention of powerful patrons, including Catherine de' Medici and the constable Anne de Montmorency, both of whom commissioned from him grottos of which we have only fragments or descriptions. It is for Catherine's grotto that Palissy set up an atelier in the Tuileries in Paris, sometime between 1565 and 67. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre forced the Huguenot potter to flee Paris and move to Sedan, where he increasingly concentrated on his scientific interests. By 1575, he was back in Paris, leading scientific conferences during which he displayed, in a museum-like context, the natural wonders he had discovered. Finally, in 1586, he was arrested and sentenced to death for heresy. The poet Agrippa d'Aubigny relates the story, now generally regarded as apocryphal, that Palissy was visited by Henri III, who asked him to renounce his faith, but the potter refused. According to Pierre de l'Étoile, he died of hunger, mistreatment, and neglect in the Bastille in 1590. Much of what we know about Palissy stems from his writings. The Architecture et Ordonnance de la Grotte Rustique de Monseigneur le Duc de Montmorency, which contains precious information on the grottos for the constable and was published in 1563. The Recette Véritable, in which Palissy developed his ideas on agriculture, geology, and mines, and was published in 1564. And especially his Discours Admirable, containing a section entitled The Art of the Earth, which focuses on his experimentations in the realm of ceramics, and was published in 1580. As one might expect, Palissy's texts do not offer impartial records of his existence and activities. Rather, they blend factual information with carefully crafted narratives that offer interesting insight into his philosophies and the image of himself he wished to leave for posterity. Among the things that Palissy insists upon is the fact that he is a, quote, simple artisan poorly instructed in letters, end quote, who has, quote, not had a book other than the sky and the earth, which is known to all, end quote. It's for this reason that he writes in the vernacular, in his own words, I prefer to say the truth in my rustic language than lies in a rhetorical one. The artist also repeatedly emphasized the importance of empirical practice over theory, an inclination very much in keeping with Protestant ideals that advocated personal, direct knowledge of God. The supremacy of practice over theory is central to The Art of the Earth, which describes his struggle to create white enamel. His impetus for doing so, as he explains, was seeing an earthenware cup of great beauty, possibly an example of Saint-Porcher ware or Medici porcelain. Palissy is careful to mention that he embarks on this search without knowing anything about clay or firing pots. Like Michelangelo, another artist eager to shape his own myth, Palissy claims to be entirely self-taught, making his accomplishments all the more impressive. The Art of Earth recounts how over several long years Palissy experimented by creating different mixtures of crushed substances and applying them to pottery shards, but had trouble at the firing stage and so tested out to different kilns. It's in a glassmaker's kiln that he first succeeds in making the white enamel he so coveted. This drove him to create for himself a similar kiln, and more experimentation ensued, eventually resulting in the terre jaspée and rustique figuline. While Palissy shares the many physical, emotional, and financial hardships he endured, he refrains from divulging the secrets of his success, encouraging the reader to go experiment for himself. Palissy, his trials, his triumphs, and his colorful earthenware largely faded into obscurity as the Baroque movement bloomed into full gilded formality under Louis XIV. It was not until the 18th century that the potter once again attracted interest, this time from philosophers and doctors who saw in Palissy's scientific interests glimmers of their own enlightened thinking. Among them was the scientist Antoine-René Ferchaud de Réaumur, who argued that Palissy was the first to arrive at the conclusion that the layering of fossils in the earth outside Paris was caused not by a biblical flood, but rather by a prehistoric sea. Palissy is given an entire paragraph in the entry on chemistry in Diderot's famed Encyclopédie. The potter is described as a truly singular man, a simple worker without letters, possessing observational genius and clarity of vision, a description of which Palissy himself would surely have been proud. It was Palissy the scientist, unafraid to speak the truth and to go against centuries of conventional wisdom, who was resurrected by these philosophers and who in this manner crafted for themselves a native precursor of courageous, outspoken behavior. The potter would achieve a new level of fame in the 19th century, which came to celebrate him not only as a dedicated scientist, but also as an impassioned artist and martyr willing to die for his convictions. The period's patriotic interest in constructing history, combined with its nostalgia for great artistic achievements of the pre-industrialized past, fueled admiration for Palissy and his works. The rise of Palissy's popularity at this point owes much to the Revolution of 1830 and to the publication 14 years later of the first modern edition of his complete works by the pharmacist Paul-Antoine Cap, which is still regarded as a key contribution to the study of the potter's art and life. Cap sang Palissy's praises in his preface, crediting him with having laid the foundation for most modern doctrines pertaining to the arts and sciences. Less than 20 years later, the potter finds himself in the distinguished company of Joan of Arc, Christopher Columbus, and Gutenberg, among others, in Le Civilisateur, a history of humanity through great men penned by the politician Alphonse de Lamartine in 1852. Palissy also earns a spot in Michelet's Histoire de la France, where he is described as an inventor, a simple man, and a saint. The potter even ignited the imagination of Honoré de Balzac, who used him as the inspiration for Balthazar Claes, the Promethean hero of his famous novel, The Quest for the Absolute, which was published in 1834. Just as Palissy searches for the secret of how to make white enamel, so does Claes fervently devote himself to trying to make precious metals and diamonds using alchemy, turning his back on the rules of society in the process. Here we have a mid-19th century illustration of Balthazar displaying the self-neglect of genius, as Balzac describes it. It didn't take long for collectors to turn their interest toward Palissy. Among his greatest champions in this period was Alexandre du Sommerard, whose passion for the arts of medieval and Renaissance France culminated in a collection so vast that he purchased the Hôtel des Abbés de Cluny to house it. And of course, there was the violinist Charles Sauvageot, who acquired 88 pieces which were considered to be by Palissy and his school, and which formed a part of the generous gift he made to the Louvre in 1856. This painting by Roberts famously captures Sauvageot in his apartment, framed by his beloved ceramics that fill nearly every inch of the space. The craze for Palissy ware encouraged new generations of French artisans to draw inspiration from his oeuvre, leading to the emergence of the so-called schools of Tours and Paris of Palissysts. The issue of imitation versus innovation elicited from these new proponents of the Palissy style different responses shaped by both ideological and commercial concerns. Some, like the musician and antiquarian Georges Poul, a leading member of the Parisian school, sought mainly to remain as faithful as possible to their models. Poul, who began producing ceramics after 1855, fashioned unsigned pieces that were so close both technically and aesthetically to pieces produced or attributed to Palissy and his school that unscrupulous dealers started selling them as fakes, and so he started to sign his work. Others took a more nuanced approach. In this respect, one must cite in particular the key figure in this new wave of Palissysts, Charles-Jean Avissot, a native of Tours. Among the most remarkable things about Avissot is how he modeled his own life on Palissy's, thereby creating a connection between himself and the defunct artist that extended beyond aesthetic vision into the realm of biography and moral character. An article published in 1847 in L'Illustration explicitly referred to that connection by dubbing Avissot a new Palissy, and drawing attention to the many ways the lives of both men had intersected. The author of the article, known only by the initials HL, declared the two to be the same in myriad respects. Quote, "Same work, same courage, same painful trials, same success, and as we will soon be able to say, same rewards, same renown." End quote. Although HL was quick to point out that Avissot was no mere imitator. Avisso's artistic career, like that of his illustrious predecessor, was anchored in the pursuit of unlocking secrets. In this case, the secrets of Palissy's technique. As it had for Palissy with his white cup, Avisso's quest also began with an artistic epiphany, seeing in 1825 a perforated cup and rustic basin attributed to Palissy in the collection of the Baron de Besenval, in whose faience factory Avisso was then active as a painter on clay. Avisso's own myth could only be amplified by the fact that proof of the special artistic temperament he shared with Palissy lay in their similar responses to the sight of an exceptional object shrouded in mystery. For both men, that sensorial experience became a catalyst for creativity that defined their lives. Like the Huguenot potter, Avisso was a man of many interests, including the natural sciences, even turning his home in Tours into a repository for a wide range of reptilian and botanical life. Both Palissy and Avisso claim to have experienced suffering as a condition of their success. And unsurprisingly, Avisso's description of the 15-year period it took him to achieve his goal reads as if it were plucked from Palissy's own writings. In Avisso's words, quote, "From that moment, 1825, until 1843, unfruitful experiments, research, pain, misery, and disappointments of every sort," end quote. It's in 1843 that Avisso arrived at Palissy's technical processes. The same year, he entered a 3-month partnership with his brother-in-law, Joseph Landais, who subsequently claimed to have been the true mystery solver and rightful heir to Palissy's glory, resulting in a drawn-out dispute between the two men. Also common to Palissy and Avisso was the fact that while both artists had set out to unlock secrets by replicating what they had seen, they ultimately arrived at their own distinctive art. Indeed, Avisso created his own interpretations of the natural world that differ from those associated with Palissy in terms of their colors, forms, choice of subjects, and even their techniques, Avisso preferring in particular to model rather than to mold the creatures inhabiting his works, which accounts for their distinctly sculptural quality. Palissy also attracted the attention of Alexandre Brognard, who served as director of the Sèvres porcelain manufactory from 1800 until 1847, and who shared with the potter an interest in science. Brognard devoted a section of his treatise on the art of ceramic to Palissy, whom he described as a hero of this art form, but also repeatedly reprimanded for keeping his secrets to himself. Given the high esteem in which he held the ceramist, it was only fitting that by 1827, Brognard began acquiring Palissy pieces for the Sèvres Museum. During the Brognard years, the Sèvres manufactory also produced several works inspired by the French Renaissance, including the Vase de la Renaissance, which Brognard described in the Louvre exhibition catalogue as having a, quote, form, decoration, and coloring in the style of the vases of Bernard Palissy, end quote. In addition to Palissy's works, the man himself became a favorite iconographic motif in the period, the image of him as a thoughtful, respectable, balding and bearded middle-aged man springing up on everything from frontispieces to silver cups. We have here an elaborate plaque made by Sèvres during the Brognard era, which represents a particularly bold celebration of French identity on many levels. The decorative vocabulary is an homage to the French Renaissance, the arts of which were experiencing a tremendous revival during the July monarchy. The frame is evocative of the Galerie François Ier de Fontainebleau, which was of great interest to Louis-Philippe, who served as king during this period. The portrait bust of Palissy also looks back to earlier works. And the lower corners contain a little frog and lizard in reference to Palissy's rustique figurine. The plaque is also a demonstration of France's continued artistic excellence in the making of porcelain, gilt bronze, and enamels. The cups and plaques reflect the tradition of grisaille enameling, which became a specialty of Limoges in the 16th century. The plaque is equally an expression of national pride in its choice of subject, Bernard Palissy, important moments of whose life are represented in the medallions. Particularly interesting in terms of the myth of Palissy is the oval showing a figure with a weight in one hand and a winged arm reaching for the sky. The image is surrounded by the device, "Poverty prevents the advancement of the best of abilities," which was by then believed to have been Palissy's motto, and this idea persisted and was perpetuated by the likes of Vincent van Gogh, among others. In reality, the saying comes from Juvenal and was taken up by Andrea Alciati in his Emblemata. The emblem was then adopted by the publisher Barthélemy Breton, who used it on the frontispiece of Palissy's Recette, which was published in 1863. The central scene focuses on a key iconographic theme derived from Palissy's writings that became extremely popular in this period. The moment described in The Art of the Earth when the potter, destitute and determined, resorts to using his tables and flooring to fuel the fire in his kiln to keep it burning for 6 days and 6 nights so that he can produce his wares. In Palissy's own words, quote, "When I had thus compounded my enamel, I was forced to go out and purchase more pots in order to prove the said compound, since I had lost all the vessels I had made myself. And having covered the new pieces with the said enamel, I put them into the furnace, keeping the fire high. But then another misfortune occurred, which made me very cross, namely that when the wood was used up, I was forced to burn the palings which maintained the boundaries of my garden, which, being burnt also, I was forced to burn the tables and the flooring of my house, in order to melt the second composition. I suffered an anguish I cannot speak." The plaque's image is based on a composition by Charles-Alexandre Debac of 1837, and shows a serious-looking Palissy holding a table leg that will serve as kindle for the fire in one hand, and one of his creations, a cup, in the other. This is Palissy as solitary creator, calm and confident in his mission, unperturbed by those who mock him and whom he describes at length in his texts, and which here take the form of a debt collector and naysayers, including his wife, whom he rather uncharitably described as a second persecution. This vision of the determined potter who succeeds was certainly well suited to the Sèvres manufactory and its ambitions, which in this period included reviving not only the aesthetics of France's glorious Renaissance, but its techniques as well. Louis-Philippe was particularly insistent that Sèvres should, quote, "renew the fabrication of enameled pieces in the manner of the Limousin," as Brongniart explained. A review of the 1846 annual exhibition of Sèvres wares touched on the significance of the plaque in this respect. Quote, "This charming plaque, in which we have noticed the happy alliance of porcelain and enamels, makes us hope that before long, and with the help of its skilled craftsmen, the manufactory of Sèvres will bring about the rebirth of a production associated with the names of Léonard Limousin, Pierre Exman, Petiot, etc." In his treatise on the art of ceramic, Brongniart had written of Palissy, quote, "He possesses the qualities that make up a hero, having a lofty goal, seeking with perseverance to attain it by overcoming, without backing away, without stopping for an instant, the obstacles that present themselves, and finally to succeed, and in this manner to acquire popular renown," end quote. Had Brongniart also been thinking of himself when he penned those words? By virtue of its technical complexity and excellence, the plaque alludes to the notion that Brongniart and his colleagues were following in Palissy's footsteps. This continuity is reinforced by the fact that Palissy's creations, the rewards for his sacrifice, look more like Sèvres' inventions than his own. Passionately described by Palissy, the story of his burning furniture to feed his kiln is anchored in the notion of fire as a fundamentally masculine element that possesses dual powers of destruction and generation. Indeed, the flames consume his possession, in fact, nearly seem to have consumed him, since he is on the verge of physical exhaustion throughout much of the process. But in the end, they yield the works of art that he was so desperate to create. Fire, as a destructive yet creative force, was a favorite conceit in France during Palissy's lifetime, expressed in various imagery, including representations of François I's salamander, with its motto of Nutrisco et extinguo. The theme was even given a special place in the center of the Galerie François Ier, where stood a cabinet featuring a representation of Semele, perishing in the heat of Jupiter's fiery glory, the destructive union which resulted in giving life to Dionysus. The theme was also key to Benvenuto Cellini's description of his casting of the Perseus as recounted in his autobiography, which was first printed in 1728 and first published in French in 1822. In fact, there are many similarities between Cellini and Palissy's narratives, including that both men insist on the physical and emotional exertions they experienced using similar language. Both had to deal with the disintegration of their roofs, and they also both had to sacrifice personal items to the fire. Palissy his furniture, and Cellini his pewter vessels. The similarities are so strong that it's even been suggested that Palissy may have obtained a copy of Cellini's manuscript before publishing his Discours in Paris in 1580, although it seems likelier that both artists relied on a common source. Whatever its connection to Cellini's autobiography, Palissy's account of his epic struggle with his kiln riveted 19th century audiences. In statues of the potter, which became increasingly popular in the early part of the Third Republic as cities rushed to boost civic pride by commissioning effigies of local heroes, Palissy's kiln is often integrated into the composition, functioning as an attribute but also as a symbol of perseverance. The kiln also appears in this over life-size representation of the potter snapping his fingers as if having just made a discovery. The sculpture is an homage to progress, both by virtue of its subject matter and its medium. Modeling and firing this ambitious statue in hard-paste porcelain could only have been made possible thanks to the technical advances of the 19th century. A celebration of France's enduring excellence in the ceramic arts from the Renaissance to the modern age, the statue, which was made by Manufacture Gilles of Paris, was shown at the Universal Exhibition of 1867. The story of Palissy burning his furniture lent itself especially well to dramatic interpretations, such as Fragonard's composition, which gives center stage to the glowing kiln, whose insatiable hunger must be satisfied by strapping men working under the orders of Palissy, who claimed his shirt never had a chance to dry during this period. The image of Palissy burning his furniture was destined to become an iconic feature of elementary school books during the Third Republic and beyond, in fact, until the end of the 1960s. The episode helped to diffuse the notion of Palissy as a resourceful and visionary artist, a man of modest means willing to make the necessary sacrifices to promote the advancement of knowledge. The image became instrumental in teaching generations of French children about the importance of hard work and thinking about the greater good, all values that were central to the new republic and educational reforms put into place by Jules Ferry, the so-called Ferry laws that made education free, 1881, obligatory and secular, 1882. As constructed through his own writings and through the aspirations of subsequent generations of thinkers, Palissy, the artist/teacher/scientist/unwavering Protestant, became a repository for all the hopes and ideals of Republican France. The image of Palissy burning his furniture had such staying power because it encapsulated the idea of progress and success coming out of sacrifice and destruction, notions that were central to France's revolutions and the iconic images they inspired. Thank you.